ESPN released their NFL Power Rankings post-free agency. The Super Bowl champion Chiefs are at the top once again, followed by the Ravens, Niners, Saints, and Packers. The Bucs, winners of the Tom Brady sweepstakes, are ranked number 10. Max, I'll start with you here. Which offseason move will have the biggest Super Bowl impact this season?
Emmanuel Sanders going to the Saints. We're talking about Super Bowl. The Saints the last several years have been a lot of people's preseason picks as NFC champs, if not Super Bowl champs, because when all was said and done, you looked at the team and you thought top to bottom they're the best. Plus, they have a quarterback you trust in big moments, although Drew Brees actually has come up small in some big moments recently. Let's be honest. I suppose given his resume, he's come up big enough times that that sort of thing could happen to anyone. But really, what have the Saints missed in recent years? It's a legit number 2 receiver with Michael Thomas. And I've gone back and forth on Sanders in recent years. Is he a jag, just a guy, or is he more than that? I think he's more than that. He went... In other words, like, obviously he's very good, he's versatile, but at what level can he do all the different things he does? I think on a very high level. The guy's just excellent. He puts up the numbers no matter what you ask him to do. And more than that, guys, wherever he goes, they win the Super Bowl, or at least get there. He's been to the Super Bowl with 3 different teams, and I don't think it's coincidental, because when that guy's your number 2 receiver, you got a hell of a receiving core, at least a hell of a number 1 guy. They got an all-purpose back out of the backfield, or at least a very versatile back, a guy who can catch passes and do things out of the backfield, obviously in Kamara. They have Thomas and now Emmanuel Sanders. I've brought up the fact that Taysom Hill is not just a gadget player like people think. They're grooming him to be the next quarterback, but he can play. He's really fast, can play obviously an effective running back. He can catch passes. He can be a fullback, for crying out loud. What Emmanuel Sanders does is ratchet up an already Super Bowl caliber offense to a very well-rounded team with a great coach, a great quarterback, and a good enough defense, especially against the run, where when we're talking about the teams that made a move that could tip the scales in their favor, I think it's the Saints. I think, once again, the Saints, at least pre-draft, are going to be, at this moment, many people's pick to get to the Super Bowl at least, and I think Emmanuel Sanders is the guy that puts them over the top.
I got news for you, Max. I don't dislike what you're saying. I guess for me, I think the very thing that you're pointing to is what could dilute your argument, because the New Orleans Saints have been allergic to prosperity over the last couple of years. They've been the favorites the last couple of years, and it's because they've been the favorites that some would argue that they've ultimately succumbed to it. Now, obviously, no pass interference call against the Rams, Nicole Roby, Coleman. A couple of years ago, last year, they went into the playoffs and then got smacked around by Minnesota. We get all of that. But the other side to this is that for me personally, I'm going to say Tom Brady and the Bucs. And here's why. The Bucs did finish 7-9. I got news for you. We're talking about 3 victories. You're a playoff team. That's 10 wins. They lost in overtime to Seattle. They lost by 7 to New Orleans. They split with the other 2 teams in their division in Carolina and Atlanta. So when I look at, actually, I think they beat Atlanta twice. So I'm looking at Tom Brady being there, and you basically can sit up there and say he's never thrown more than 14 interceptions in a season in his entire career. Jameis Winston obviously threw 30. So you're talking about limiting your interceptions by at least 16, okay? You're talking about a defense that was ranked 8th in efficiency, and you're talking about whether or not Tom Brady, with Mike Evans, with Chris Godwin, with Cameron Brate, with O.J. Howard and these boys, can Tom Brady's presence make a 3 to 4 game difference? I would say yes. And if that's the case, you're talking about them potentially challenging, if not winning, the NFC South, which would negate everything everybody's saying about New Orleans. New Orleans clearly is formidable, and picking up Emmanuel Sanders to pair him with Michael Thomas is definitely something that cannot be ignored. I totally appreciate that. But if Jameis Winston was that much of a liability because of his turnovers, and we recognize that it's Tom Brady there now instead of him, so at the very least, turnovers are not going to be as problematic for you as a franchise. Now you've got something. And I'd say in my estimation, because of that, Tom Brady would be a more important move than Emmanuel Sanders in New Orleans, because Drew Brees is probably still going to target Michael Thomas every chance he gets. We ain't going to see too much different from the New Orleans Saints in terms of how prolific their offense has been. They'll be prolific again. What about Tampa Bay?
Tom Brady is the move, I think. I agree with you. He's the move that could make the most difference on a team. I just don't see the Bucs as a Super Bowl contender at this moment. I have to see how that defense pans out. I know what you mean about the underlying defensive metrics. Who knew? They were actually good, but that's not what the eyeball test said. And so I don't see Brady as like, now the Bucs are going to win a Super Bowl. But I have thought the Saints, look, the odds are against any team, even the odds on favorite winning the Super Bowl. There are just too many other teams. One and done elimination, as the NFL is, of course. It's tackle football. There's too much variance in terms of, the underdog can beat the better team. But odds on favorite right now, I think the Saints are once again right there, and now they added something, Stephen A., they haven't had in recent years. They haven't had a legit number 2 receiver. Now they do, and furthermore, Brady's a greater quarterback than Drew Brees, as great as Drew Brees has been. But at this point, because Brees is a little younger and hasn't lost his accuracy, his arm strength has wavered a little bit, but that's never really been his thing anyway. But his accuracy seems like as good as ever, practically. Because he hasn't lost that, I still think of Brees as elite, as an arguably top 5 quarterback. I don't see Tom Brady that way anymore. He will have a chance to prove me wrong, but I see him top 15 quarterback, maybe top 12, but I don't see him as a top 5 quarterback, at least not off his performance last season. Drew Brees, I still see that way, and so I see their team as, especially continuity with the coach, the whole thing, I see the Saints as once again knocking on the door to win a Super Bowl, and I think this move puts them over the top.
Well, I think that good receivers have the ability to make a quarterback look very, very good. And I think it's one of those situations where Tom Brady, again, last year with N'Keal Harry and Lacazette, I mean, what did you have to work with? The Julian Edelman that had been relatively injured to some degree, just fighting nicks and knacks throughout the season. Josh Gordon was going, Antonio Brown was going. You don't have those requisite weapons. You're going to have that in Tampa Bay. The turnovers are going to be cut in half in all probability. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.